Hi, I'm Gray Newell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Naetyr LLC. We're a startup working out of Seattle, Washington on a game that we've internally entitled Fury.
Gray Newell is the eldest son of co-founder and current CEO of Valve Software, Gabe Newell. Last July, I was contacted by a person claiming to not only be friends with quote-unquote Gabe's son, but that he was also developing a video game with his son, codenamed Fury.
Fury is a project that I really began my thinkings of 2-ish years ago when I played the first Titanfall and was exposed to the currently in development game Star Citizen. I latched onto a lot of the ideas and the concepts they were going for, and for a while I really wanted to work at Respawn or Cloud Imperium, and then I decided to take my game in its own direction and take the ideas that I learned from those experiences and push them even farther.
Obviously, now known to be legitimate, back in July I was more than skeptical. However, due to the unique nature of the claim, I humored it, and I'm glad I did. Within an hour, I was thrown into a Discord call with Gray, and in this one conversation, I was introduced to a new verified Valve contact, introduced to Gray's development team, and introduced to Gray, the human, whom, due to his relative proximity to Valve growing up, has many interesting stories of the company, such as
the final boss of Half-Life 1, actually, the giant evil baby monster, is supposed to be me. When my mother was in childbirth, they were thinking, what's something really scary? And at the time, having a child seemed to be the most scary thing to everyone.
I can imagine that this is a lot to take in for any Valve fan. All of a sudden, there is this new pillar in the community that has more experiences than all of us combined. And he is channeling everything he has learned to create something completely new, and most importantly, something completely his own. So what makes Gray tick? What in his day-to-day gives him the inspiration to create?
Well, I started my creative career in art, a little bit of photography, which transitioned into graphic design, some video editing. I was a rower for about 5 years. I rowed at Royal Henley in England, quite a big deal for me. I've been a huge fan of drum and bass for a very long time. Kino, Pendulum specifically. Pendulum was the band that got me into drum and bass in the first place, back in middle school. So.
And professionally, Gray pulls inspiration from many places, most not even being related to Valve, and understandably so. You tried growing up so close to that company and not at least getting a little tired of it.
When I turned 10, my father bought me a subscription to World of Warcraft, and I was immediately immersed in this incredible new fantastic world of elves and dwarves and monsters and magic. Through the years, every single game I've played, every single movie I've seen, this project I'm working on is a collection of many different experiences. It's really, at the end of the day, the game that I've always wanted to play.
So Fury is a culmination of everything Gray holds dear over his lifetime thus far, and although the game is in pre-production, it's easy to see the passion burning in Gray, and although his ideas are definitely ambitious, it seems that the development is going smoothly and productively.
We're working towards creating a project that's goal is to give the community tools to create their own experiences, similar to Gary's mod, Spore, in the same realm as Star Citizen. But in short, it's a science fiction MMORPG FPS set in sort of the semi-near future in the next 100 years. Some of the people at Valve called us the good kind of crazy. We're trying to make this happen, and there is no X factor, there is no crazy beneficiary who's going to keep us afloat with millions and millions of dollars. This really falls to, is this what the gaming community wants? And I believe it is. I believe that we're at a point now where we can push the technology, we can push the ideas, and we can really make something fantastic. Well, Artifact was originally going to be another game, I believe. I may be talking out of my ass here, so fact check, but from my understanding, when I was brought in as the guinea pig, because I had nothing to do on a weekend, there was another game called Artifact, and now the current Artifact is Artifact. It was just the Dota card game.
While on the topic of Artifact, a hotly contested story in the community, let's go over exactly what Gray has learned from Valve, both positively and negatively, when developing Fury.
Most of what I've learned has just been through osmosis. The time that I've spent at Valve and around the people who work there, I would say, is far more valuable than any specific lesson I've been taught or has been passed down to me. And that sort of through their experiences, their work, through just the connection to them, period, I've learned a tremendous amount. I've been just a part of it since I was an infant. Truth be told, I don't play a huge amount of Valve games. Call it overexposure, call it what you will. I think that they have some enormous successes that I've learned a huge amount from. namely Team Fortress, which I've drawn comparable inspiration from, but who hasn't? You could say that inspiration's been drawn from Overwatch or the class-based system in Battlefield, Call of Duty. In terms of Valve games, I suppose Team Fortress is probably the largest contributor. I put quite a large amount of time into Dota, which the MOBA aspects of Dota have trickled over into the shooter genre now, and namely Titanfall, which is where I picked up on the inspiration of the grunts in Titanfall, the non-player controlled characters, as a really, really useful gameplay asset. One of the most valuable things I've learned from Valve and Blizzard is that no effort is truly unwasted. Ideas can be recycled, reused, picked up later. Assets are the same way. Blizzard, I commend them on their ability to reuse assets year after year after year. If there's one thing I'd like to see Valve do, it's push it more with their ideas. The people there are the smartest I've ever met, the hardest working, the most inspired. I think that the culture at Valve is a very good one, but they've kind of found this point where they're a working machine. And that's good, but I think that they need to reach out and do something scary. Do something that they don't know what the outcome is going to be. They make incredibly smart decisions, but sometimes you have to do something stupid. Sometimes you have to have a stupid, crazy idea and just say, fuck it, go with it. Valve has just mind-bogglingly enormous amount of resources at their back. I really hope that they find the courage to really start throwing them at something new. And I know of what they're working on and how they're going to begin pushing things. I want to see them push the envelope again. I want to see Valve be scary again, in a good way.
While talking to Gray, the popular industry topics of the day were thrown around and whether they would play a part in Fury's design.
To answer your question about esports, I have considered that very much, and that the game should be downscalable to the point in which we can have an arena shooter. I actually plan on retaining all of these smaller modules in the final game as sort of simulation or as an esport within the game, and that players will be able to compete against each other in competitive environments that are much more isolated. I've been personally very on the fence about virtual reality. I think that it has an enormous amount of potential. That much is obviously clear. But I think that as it stands, the technology right now is it's infantile. We're still figuring out how to commercialize it, how to get it to be useful to do the things that we want. The technology is fledgling at the moment, and well, I'm personally incredibly excited to see where it goes. Brain interfacing in the future. I'm more just waiting to see once we've arrived at the next step before we start thinking about it. So we considered Source 2 for a really long time. We wanted to move forward with it. We talked with a lot of Valve internally, and we couldn't really arrive at a conclusion on what it would be capable of at the moment. There were just too many unknowns, and we needed to start development. So later on, we may swap over to Source 2 if it becomes a more viable option. We have no reservations about switching engines if need be. Essentially, we've been looking at engines that have already paved the road for the kind of content that we want to put out. So Source 2 is absolutely on the table.
And while on the topic of Source 2,
the biggest problem of it is nobody knows anything. When we went to go talk to them about Source 2, nobody actually knew anything. Dead serious. They just were like, you should go talk to this person, you should go talk to this person. And it just started going in a loop, and we went back to the previous person they told us to talk to, and I was like, alright, this isn't gonna happen.
That's great for you. That's Naetyr, and most importantly, that's Fury. Currently, the project is all being done out of pocket. There are no investors that have been pitched to yet, due most in part to the upcoming crowdfunding campaign.
A big part of what we're doing and how I structured the project initially when we began development was to segment it into what we called modules that are being developed in succession based on how much crowdfunding we get, much like Star Citizen, which actually, once they received massively more funding than they had initially anticipated, they had to upscale their project to meet the needs of the community. Whereas I took that into account when I started designing the game, and our game will be able to scale up and down as needed between just a first-person battle arena module all the way to potentially a plethora of planets, even procedurally generated at that point, that span from faction to race to all of these different things. I think that it's possible that companies may want to support us, EA, Activision, Valve, whoever. People will want to give us money, whatever, but it depends on what we have to pay for that. I don't want this to become some large company's pet project. I want this to be for the community. I want this to be for us, the people working on the game. It's about us. That's my prime directive, in a way, is to just make something amazing. It's not about the money that we make off of this. It's about creating something new and something incredible.
Is my hair all right?
Your hair looks spot on. It
Alright.
hasn't fallen over or anything. You're good to go.
I love it. It's perfect. I have a bad case of rogue hair.
Headphone hair.
Yeah.
Something like that.
No, it's this little gremlin that sits on my head and occasionally tries to kill me.
Little cowlick.
Your hair tries to kill you.
Yeah,
It's
and
bad.
other people. My mom called it the rat's nest.
Well, that's supportive.
Not really.